Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ambassador Sujan Chenoy, for inviting me to this particular session. As I can see, we are left with only the serious-minded research scholars. So I will say some things which may be slightly contrary to what has been said since the morning. But basic idea is to educate ourselves and to see what exactly happened, which way it happened, and what is the takeaway from here, and what are the lessons to be learned. So starting, let us say, from the very beginning, and referring to the topic that has been given to me, the challenges of leadership from the air point of view. Perhaps the first challenge was for everybody to be on the same page. That was the start point in Kargil. How everybody should be on the same page. To reconstruct the whole thing, if we go back, it started off by saying that just a few Mujahideens have infiltrated, and that is how the whole thing started. But if you go back into the history, you'll find that it was, even when the army chief was still in Poland, that the vice chief of army staff came to air headquarters to say that they wanted to use armed helicopters, or attack helicopters actually. When they were questioned by air headquarters on two things. One, the attack helicopters that we had at that time were the Mi-25 and Mi-35, and they were not in a position to be able to operate efficiently at those altitudes. That was number one. Number two, the question that was posed as to what were the targets, where were the targets, and what were the defenses. Now, these three things are essential for any Air Force to plan their mission, operational mission. There were not any satisfactory answers coming to that particular question. I would like to flag two issues here. One, there is a generally accepted feeling that during Kargil war, initially, the Air Force was reluctant to come in. That is the general impression which has been created over a period of time. And I like to mention here that there was no such thing at all. What I said just now earlier, it was exactly that. And the fact that the Air Force wanted to know as to what the targets were and to let them decide as to what they are going to utilize to achieve their mission. That was the main point. But as things unveil themselves, and if you go down, this question of that fog of knowing who were there, whether they were people who were actually Mujahideens, or there were a mixture of Mujahideens and the regulars, and so on and so forth, carried on. And it was till 19th of May, when Defense Minister, who was visiting Srinagar, even he went to the extent of making a statement that there are few Mujahideens, and we will take care of them within 48 hours. I do remember at that time, while the CCS meetings were going on, the army chief had returned, and the gravity of the situation was now being understood slowly as to what has happened. And that time also, this question of whether there were regular army people and they had done that or not, it was still being debated. The fact was, to my mind, that as we have all discussed, that it was a giant intelligence failure to begin with. Why it happened, we all know. But the fact was that before Op Vijay was launched, I think Op Coverup was launched before that. And that was to be natural, because if something happens, your first reaction is to do something quickly to undo it, so that you can say that I have now created a situation where I have corrected my mistake. But the fact is that was not possible. Why it was not possible? Because of the level of intrusion, because of the number of people who had come in. And I think more light on this will be thrown by Brigadier Joslin Singh, who follows me and who actually fought the battle on the ground. On 19th of May, while the CCS was meeting, even at that time, it was Mr. Joslin Singh who asked this point-blank question, that if you feel that they were only Mujahideens, first of all, what are they doing there? Because Mujahideens do not go and sit and occupy. They attack and they carry on, they go back. And if they're only Mujahideens, then why do you need the Air Force? Take care of it yourself. Now this is happening as late as 19th of May. It was only on 23rd May when it was decided between the three chiefs during a COC meeting that we will have to go back and tell the political leadership that all three services will have to operate to evict the intruders. And on 25th, the decision was taken, yes, we will use the air power, we'll use the Air Force. And at that time, I'm not sure whether it was Brijesh Mishra or it was the Prime Minister himself who had kept quiet throughout all these CCS meetings. He had never uttered a word. I'm given to understand that he just said three words, that don't cross the LOC. So this was a mandate which was given. And as Mr. Shakti Sinha brought out in the morning, in hindsight, I think it was the best political decision taken by the Prime Minister, because it gave us unmatched diplomatic and political leverage later on. It is true that as far as the Air Force was concerned, it had to fight an air battle with the hands tied behind the back. But here comes the leadership and the innovation that goes, and that's part and parcel of the flexibility and adaptability of air power, that it was taken care of, it was gone around, and the results were achieved. Talking about innovation, I'd like to bring out two or three things here. First, about the surveillance or the recce to know where the targets are. As you know, on 23rd May, we had a Canberra which was shot down while carrying out photo recce. It managed to recover at Srinagar, and thereafter it was on the ground. There were large gaps in understanding and knowing exactly where the targets were. And that was a time when the Air Force decided to use the MiG-25. Ladies and gentlemen, at that time I was commanding Central Air Command based at Bamroli, Allahabad. And all these strategic assets, including Mirages and MiG-25s, came under my command. So when we were looking at how to solve this problem of actually acquiring those targets, of collecting intelligence about them, it struck me as to why not use the MiG-25. As you know, MiG-25, one of the fastest aircraft in the world, actually was a Mark III aircraft for strategic reconnaissance to match the American SR-71. And it was designed to do high-level photo missions on the strategic level. As a matter of fact, it had such capability in terms of cameras that in 4 sorties it could cover the entire landmass of Pakistan. That is the kind of coverage that it had. But it also had a tactical role where it could fly at lower altitudes, at 8 kilometers, to carry out the TBA, shall we say, reconnaissance. But there was a problem. The problem was that they could either fly around 20 to 25 kilometers at height, or they could fly subsonic at 8 kilometers height for the photo missions. The targets in Kargil being at the height of around 4 to 5 kilometers, we thought that we'll fly this aeroplane at 13 kilometers to give it a 8 kilometers AGL to get the correct, what we call V by H, to get most optimum photo results. But there were skepticism as to how this aircraft could be flown in that profile, because earlier it had not been flown. We did some trials. I actually flew a sortie myself, and then we found that there was no problem, that we could actually use this aircraft. And when this aircraft was used, this happened on 17th of June, and 18th of June this aircraft was inducted into Adhampur for the photo missions thereafter. And I think Marshal Nambiar was here this morning. He would say that those photographs came in very handy. Of course, Manto Dhalo had been discovered before that, But there were so many other targets which were discovered during these formations, which were engaged later on. The second thing that I'd like to mention is about the innovative use of the Mirage. As Marshal Namia had also brought out, that the Mirage actually was the aircraft which had fantastic weapon aiming systems. But the only problem was that this aircraft actually was not being utilized in the strike role as its primary role. As he mentioned in the morning, that it was basically air defense, air superiority fighter, and electronic warfare fighter. The strike role was its secondary role. Very quickly we carried out trials, and we found that this aircraft actually had the best weapon aiming computers, and it could be utilized so that we could actually carry out accurate attack even with dumb bombs. As you know, compared with the Soviet aircraft at that time, the MiG-27, the MiG-21s and the MiG-23s, this aircraft could achieve much, much better results. That came to be seen later on at Mantudalo, which incidentally were attacked by dumb bombs, the 250 kg bombs. One more thing which happened at that time was the general reluctance to use the Mirage by the leadership because of the fact that the NATO bombs that we had a very small quantity available with us, and most of these were actually earmarked for Chiefs of Staff Committee targets in case of the escalation, if it was to happen. So we very quickly converted or carried out this thing to make sure that we do this with 1,000-pounders. So we actually modified this aircraft very quickly with 1,000-pounders, which was against the norms. And if we had gone to the French, we would have paid a large amount of money, and they would have charged us, and not only that, and taken about 6 months to do it. But we did it in exactly 7 days. So not only that we made the Mirage to carry the 1,000-pounder, we also converted the 1,000-pounder into an LGB, and then used it very successfully in the Kargil area. Incidentally, both Wing Commander, at that time Wing Commander Namia and self, flew actually a mission on the 30th of June against Tiger Hill. And as you know, 3rd of July was the last mission, and the 4th of July was when Tiger Hill fell. The second question that often comes into discussion is that if the air power had been used from the word go when the counter-attacks took place to regain these heights, if it was joined through a joint plan, if it was done, would it have reduced the casualties? I just want to give you one parallel, and that is Tololing, when it was attacked, which happened on 23rd of May, and at that time the Air Force was not in play, it had not come into action. The number of casualties which were suffered were more than 50% of the entire number of casualties suffered during the Kargil War. Compare that with Tiger Hill. Tiger Hill, we dropped 8 bombs, LGBs. And when the final assault took place on the 4th of July, the number of casualties on the Indian side were 5. And number of casualties, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be surprised, it was such a prime post actually of the Pakistani, was also only 10. That few people were left in that post at that time. So you can understand the impact that a successful air campaign would have in terms of doing this. So what does it teach us? That there is no gainsaying, that we have to plan jointly and we have to execute in such a manner where the Air Force does that initial softening up of the target in these circumstances. This is what is needed. Before I conclude, I just want to say one thing about the Chief of Defence Staff, which is being discussed a lot these days. If CDS is the panacea of all our problems in higher defence organisation, certainly go for it. But I don't know whether that is really the answer. Because look at it like this. We have a Chiefs of Staff Committee. We have a Chairman Chiefs of Staff Committee who acts, actually he could act as the CDS as well. Today we are talking about joint Chairman Chiefs of Staff, that means permanent Chairman Chiefs of Staff. What will be his role? I have seen both the mandates given to the CDS as well as the permanent Chairman Chiefs of Staff Committee, and I find there is no difference between the two. It was in 1993 when I came back from London, as CDS, I was posted to DPS, Defence Planning Staff at that time. And we used to do what we call combined prospective planning, 5 years, 10 years and 15 years. Many years later, I find that the IDS is practically doing the same. We are talking about CDS, let's talk about it, but let's be very, very clear as to what exactly is going to achieve. And as Ambassador Chenoy also said during his comment, that unless he is given the authority to do something, I think he'll just turn out to be a paper tiger. Thank you.